We're going to be doing something a little bit different on today's episode.
I'm like, gas. I smell gas.
Spoiler alert.
So, spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it, stop listening now.
Okay, so where do we start with Good Grief? Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Good Grief. We're stoked that you're here and we're going to be doing something a little bit different on today's episode.
We are.
How are you doing today, my love?
I am doing well.
Seeing as we survived.
We survived last night, which could have been bad. So guys, today we're going to be reviewing a movie with the same name as us, Good Grief, right? So we sit down to watch this movie last night. We finished our dinner and then I'm like my senses are heightened, as anyone who's been pregnant knows.
Your sense of smell has always been strong.
It has. It has. This is like
way before baby.
Yeah.
So.
This is a next Spidey level. And so I say to Ryan, I'm like...
my nose is blocked at the best of times.
Yeah, he can't smell much at the best of times. And so I'm like, do you smell that? And he's like, what? And I'm like, gas. I smell gas. And he's like, he's like, go smell outside. I'm like, maybe it's the next door neighbor's like...
I just blamed it on the neighbors.
Yeah. They're like gas heater. They're having showers or something. I'm like, no, can't smell anything outside. I'm like, it's right here, like right in our living room. And he's like... I think I can smell it. I'm like, you think? I'm like, there's gas everywhere. And we've got our lights off in the kitchen behind us. And I just look over there and I see like one of the dials is like, meh, on high. And so that would have been going since we sat down like
the movie,
20 minutes.
Yeah.
Gas was filling the room.
Eventually I would have just passed out. Just fallen asleep. And never woken up.
Oh my word.
And we wouldn't have finished the movie.
So it would have been grief all over.
That was one of my gratitudes this morning, that you've got a strong sense of smell. Keep us protected. I've got other senses that come in handy.
You do? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tell us one.
I was just going to say, it's not a sense. I was just going to say my height. I can get things from the top shelf. So
you can reach the fire blanket.
Yeah, that's right.
And I can't. Anyway, so married life.
That was last night.
Yeah. And hopefully we won't do that with the baby.
Interrupted the movie, but we watched Good Grief last night, and we'd been meaning to. I don't know when it came out. It's
in the States it was 29th of December, but literally just on the 5th.
Right.
Yeah, on Netflix.
So it's only been out a couple of days. When you're hearing this, it's probably been out a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, disclaimer, we're going to be talking about the plot and everything that happens and dissecting it from a grief standpoint.
We get to do spoiler alert.
Yeah, so spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it, stop listening now.
That's if you plan on watching it.
Yeah, we don't want to be movie wreckers for you.
If you don't plan on watching it, I guess we're going to share the plot and the storyline, but more importantly, the relationships and the dynamics that happen through the grief and the loss that goes on in the movie. So I think
and how it's portrayed.
Yeah, and I think some of the big lessons that we pulled out of it. And we haven't seen a movie quite like it. So I think it's going to be quite interesting and also super helpful. So if you plan on seeing it, stop the tape. If you don't and you're not too worried, listen on, because I think there's going to be there's just some fascinating scenarios that come out of the movie.
Yeah. You'll still be able to watch it and enjoy it if you do listen, so. Yeah.
Spoiler alert. All right, we're just making that clear.
Yep. All disclaimers are out.
If you continue on from this point.
Do not send us a nasty message saying we ruined it for you.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so where do we start with Good Grief? It's got Dan Levy.
Yeah, Canadian actor and producer.
Yeah, and I mean, I think his rise to fame was from Schitt's Creek.
Yes. With his dad, that he produced and wrote with his dad.
Which we haven't seen. However,
no.
I know him more so from the amount of GIFs that there are online from Schitt's Creek.
GIFs and memes, yeah.
So...
You just know his face.
Yeah, so thank you, Dan.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
Plenty of emotion in his GIFs. So that was sort of like my understanding of Dan before this came out.
That guy.
Yeah, that guy. I'm like, oh, cool. Something that I'm interested in watching. And
so a much different role to Schitt's Creek.
Right. Okay.
And all the memes.
So, yeah, like I said, I haven't seen it.
It's a comedy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Good Grief isn't a comedy. It's drama. It's a romance drama.
Well, I think Google actually did say it was a comedy drama, but
Well, it was funny
but then
moments.
also then they say that it's a
Yeah.
romance drama.
Yeah,
So-
I wouldn't pitch it as a comedy.
No.
I'd definitely say romance drama.
Yeah.
But there's moments of, we laughed through it and different things and found things funny as well because we have experienced grief in all of
Yes.
those moments. So where do we start? How should we paint the picture of the movie?
Yeah, let's just paint the picture of
No-
who Dan is.
No pun
and-
intended because
Oh, he's a painter.
he's a painter and his name in the movie is Mark.
Yes, Marcus.
So it's a story about Mark and Oliver,
Yep.
who are married, and it starts, I guess, at a Christmas party.
Yeah, they work together.
Mm-hmm.
His husband Oliver is a writer, writes successful books, and he's got 2 more to come. And Dan, his husband,
Mark.
Mark.
Okay, so we're going to remove Dan.
Remove Dan.
Mark.
It's now Mark.
Yeah.
Mark, the character. He's the illustrator for him, so
Yeah.
he draws and paints. Yeah.
And so, happily married when Oliver has to head off to France for a book signing or something of the sort.
Yeah.
And is met with a tragic accident just
Yeah,
as
he's
he
leaving
leaves.
the party. Yeah, gets in a taxi.
Yeah, and so Mark sees that
Sees sirens out the
from the
window.
window, and there's been a taxi, T-boned by another car, and
Yeah.
so-
Runs out, and you don't see it, but
yeah, so it's a sudden tragic end to Oliver's life, which then obviously
before he leaves, they're on the steps saying goodbye, saying all their heartfelts. Oliver's saying how much he loves him and see you in a week, and hands him a red envelope, which Dan just subtly...
it's a Christmas card
Yeah, just slips into his jacket. Yeah. And
to be seen later
that's
in the
what's just-
movie.
end scene.
Yeah, so I guess from that point on, the story is about Mark and his journey with grief and his relationship with his friends and Oliver ongoing after that point, from when he dies.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's where the story really kicks off. And where we had our phones out taking notes through the movie, which we don't often do.
No.
So it's quite interesting seeing how his friends sort of band around him. They were very close with Oliver as well. So not only is it just Mark grieving, it's them also.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily see them grieving, I guess, as you typically would expect.
Yeah, not so much.
And
The focus is more on them supporting Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess what I was kind of taken back by is the fact that Mark, from my viewing, doesn't really grieve or doesn't really show him grieving all that much, in those early days.
Yeah, the first next scene is him waking up in bed, alone and just...
teary.
Yeah.
But it doesn't show some of those moments of
Yeah.
rage or fits,
No,
or
that's
outbursts.
kind of the most of it. Him
Yeah.
in bed is the most, he's grieving kind of thing. Doesn't want to get out. It's daytime.
You just expect that he's sort of sad.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, oh wow. To me, it didn't really show, I guess, what I went through in those early days.
And I actually don't think that was the next day. I think that was a week or a couple of weeks later, because then he gets up and goes to a meeting of sorts. Thanks for coming. And he's like, yeah, it's only been a month. So it's
It moves on quite
yeah,
fast.
they don't go through his initial first few days are awful, and he's...
Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting portrayal.
And so Dan's also written this.
Mark?
Dan
Dan's
has written
it.
this
Right.
off the back of losing his grandmother. So it's
That's
when we found that out,
Good
we're
to
like,
mention.
oh, it's quite a different scenario that he's writing about. A married couple who lose each other rather than losing grandma, and writing something similar from his experience. Yeah, he's writing something quite different, which is just unusual. But yeah,
I thought the funeral was quite interesting.
yes,
It's
in a Catholic
in a
church.
Catholic church. Very formal. Everyone's in suit and tie.
Is somber the right word?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Considering that Oliver was the life of the party.
yeah.
He was half an hour before he left to get in the taxi, he was on the table.
That's right.
Getting everyone singing this carol or this song about friends and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so quite somber, and you only see two people speak. One is the main character from his book.
That's been made into a movie.
Yep. And I'd say...
She makes it a bit about her.
Yeah, I'd say it's a lot about her, which was funny because you do hear that sort of stuff at funerals. You hear people give speeches. And
Mark's doing the eyes and the
Can we
looks
get
to
her
his
out of
friends.
here?
Yeah, like who invited her kind of thing.
Yeah.
Why is she up there speaking?
So quite funny. And then...
I kind of wanted to hear Mark speak, but...
Yeah, very interesting.
I know sometimes people...
don't or can't.
The spouse doesn't have the strength to get up there.
Yeah.
But so then Oliver's dad
spoke, and that was very heartfelt and sweet and beautiful. And so it was just this, like, I guess it's like this light and dark.
This super contrast.
Yeah, contrast.
Yeah.
Okay, so the funeral happens. I think from there, like we talked about, sort of his friends being supportive. What I loved about them being supportive was one of his best mates, who he dated
15 years
ago.
ago.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah. Came
and just moved in and stayed with him. And I mean, we had friends of ours come and do that as well, and they stayed for a couple of months.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the wonderful things about friends who have the ability to do that.
Totally. Especially because he was alone. He didn't live with anyone else.
Yeah.
It was just him and Oliver.
Just to hold space and to be there with you.
Yeah.
So I thought that was special.
Yeah, no, that was nice. That was well portrayed.
Anything you saw that you liked in the way that his friends supported?
From memory, I think he was just there and just helped get him out of the house and move life along rather than him, being just lonely and in a dark place. I think that friend helped. He knew him so well because they've been friends for so long. And so he helped usher, moments and getting him out of the house and things like that. And so did the other friend. She took him to exercise class and
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah, they did some yoga and strength training and stuff.
Yeah.
I loved that as well.
Yeah. He was full doing pull-ups with the band and everything.
Yeah. So I think
that's pretty hectic for someone who's grieving, to be honest. But
the physical activity is good.
Physical activity is good.
It
does help.
We know that it releases all sorts of chemicals that you can't deny, but feel better after doing something. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Because I thought that in the moment. I'm like, this is great. You got one friend who's just moved in to be with him, hold space. Another friend who's like, hey, let's go do something active.
Yeah. And she's a go-getter, that one. So.
Totally.
Yeah, so he's got, what were their names?
To be honest, I don't know. Yeah. It's not about them.
Yeah, it's not about them. But there's a guy and a girl best friend who are the friends who.
I think the timeline moves quite quickly. Yeah, you mentioned he's in a meeting, so he needs to get finances and all of the stuff sorted out and wills and everything. So he meets with their, I don't know if it's their accountant or their financial planner, for example.
Or lawyer.
Yeah, and she sort of says, how are you doing, sort of moving forward? And he's like, well, it's only been
3 months or something, or 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he has this moment where he explains that he realizes the brain is like a muscle and that we can train it. And he says, just like other muscles, when we lift weight, etc., they know that the weight's there. But now that my husband is gone, I need to untrain my brain.
Yeah.
So he's like, what does he say? He says, it's like a muscle. I'm just trying not to feel. And
those things, because your brain muscle has been trained to feel these emotions for this person.
And
while they're here,
they're gone.
And then they're gone. I mean, your brain's still trying to feel those things, even though they're not still here.
So I thought that was kind of like a red flag. I was like, Mark, that's pretty, so early on to be saying I'm trying not to feel, kind of blocking it.
Yeah.
What do we know? Grief is the natural response to our body after loss.
Yeah.
And so
it's trying to regulate. It's trying to get the emotions out.
Yeah. Makes sense by grieving.
Yes. So, by trying not to feel, it's just bottling it up. And,
From that point in the movie, it jumps. So that's maybe 3 months in. It jumps to 6 months. And they're all of a sudden sitting around, him and his two friends, or a few friends, and they're signing him up for a dating app. And I was like, whoa. whoa, pump the
Yeah,
brakes. I'm like,
6
6 months after a tragic loss where you were happily married. I'm like, that just felt super rushed.
Yeah.
What'd you feel?
I actually don't remember that part.
Oh, don't you?
No.
Oh, they're like signing him up and he's like, I don't know about this. And he's sort of like referencing it between the two. And one's going, oh, you'll be fine. And the other one's like, no. And he's like, well, I trust, you over you sort of thing.
Oh, no, I remember him saying, oh, was that
Yeah.
the part where he's like, do I look older? And
That's
she was
right.
like, yeah, you're allowed to. Your husband just died.
Yes.
And the guy was like, no, you don't. And he's like, I trust her.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize they were trying to sign him up to a dating app. I just thought they were just chilling and he was
No.
asking if I looked
It was
old.
no chill. It was no chill about it. That's why I'm like, man, 6 months. That is just, I felt it was like ruthless. It's
Yeah.
like, I know that they had good intentions for him and that, he's only 38, so there's plenty more life to live. But like, man, grief takes way longer than that. Some people, sure.
Totally.
Yeah,
for some people, if they've been anticipating the death
might be different.
and they've
so
had
your
those
dad's a
chats.
perfect
Yeah.
example of
My
that.
dad. Yeah, for sure.
His
that was-
story was 7 years.
Yeah, 7 years since she initially was diagnosed, but probably
Till
3
mum, yeah.
years was like the long decline.
And
they'd had those
really
chats,
deep-
like, want you to remarry, want
chats.
you to be
Yeah.
happy, find someone, yeah.
And then
Just
it
do
was
life.
still, I mean, that's the thing. We're not saying there's a timeline. We're just saying, well, 6 months felt rushed if that was me in Mark's shoes. But your dad, it was a year.
Nah, it actually probably was 6
Oh,
to
was
8,
it?
6 to 8 months.
Okay.
Yeah, when he started dipping his toes.
Right.
Yeah. And ended up getting married 2 years
Right.
after. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is different for everyone.
Mm.
I just felt in that moment, I was like, nope, 6 months, back off. Hey, but
Yeah.
that's just me. That's just me.
And so then he then in another meeting?
Uh,
He cuts that first meeting short. Hey, he's like,
yeah.
can't do this or something.
Well, it flicks from 6
no,
to
he's-
11 months.
No, back in that, sorry, to cut back, remember he starts melting down in the cafe where they met. You actually see a grief moment where he's like,
When he's with the financial planner again.
yeah.
Yeah, he does.
So he does have a
split
grief
second.
moment. And then he cuts the meeting short. He's like, can we reschedule? Like,
Well, what occurred was she mentioned that she'd seen spending in France that looked like for 2 people.
Okay, so
and he
that's
had
what
no idea about that.
yeah.
So he was caught off guard.
And she's like, oh, you weren't that second person. He's like, no.
yeah, and so he freaks out and then lets some stuff out. So
Yeah.
that's where he sort of first gets this inkling of like
What happened
else
in
is going on.
Paris? Yeah.
Mhm.
What don't I know?
Yeah. From there, it goes to like 11 months where they're in the kitchen, him and his friends again, and they're like, one of them breaks up, she breaks up with her boyfriend and says, let's go out and have a few drinks. And he's like, I just want to stay at home. I've got some work to do. And she sort of says, what kind of work are you doing on a Friday night? And the other friend, he goes, he's going to open the Christmas card
Yes.
because it's coming up 12 months, the anniversary of the death. And
The red card he got handed to on the steps before his husband died.
yeah, and
Yeah.
she's like, far out. And so again, this sort of sense of like expectation and rush. She goes like, well, freaking like open that thing up,
Have a cry,
and then come party.
and then put something expensive on
Yeah.
and come meet us at the gallery. Yeah.
And so I don't know. Again, it's kind of this balance. I think.
Well, it's like, just get it over with and come be fun again.
Yeah. And I don't know. I can see her heart in that. But she also says along the lines of like, it's been a year, You should be back to you by now.
Mm.
And that's the expectations I think that we can often cop from friends.
And like, you still haven't opened that?
Yeah. Like this expectation of like, why haven't you? Why aren't you normal? Like, why isn't the same Mark here?
Yeah.
So I think that was like a really pivotal moment.
And a good view of like what so many people's friends
totally.
are like. Yeah. Especially when they haven't grieved and they don't understand the feelings and the emotions
Yeah.
surging in your body.
So anyway, that's what he does. He sits down and opens the card. And we were quite shocked because you read this card, you think
So
it's a
shocked.
lovely...
We paused and rewound and
Yeah.
read
Like,
it
what?
again. Huh?
Say what?
We did get told there was a twist, so
Yeah, and
Spoiler alert, here's the twist.
yeah, his husband Oliver essentially says, you know, I love you, Merry Christmas. I've also found someone new.
Outside our marriage.
And I know we'll need to talk about it. I'll be home after, you know, the weekend and we'll talk about it. And man, like, my heart was broken. I'm like, after a year of grieving someone that you were happily married to receive this betrayal of sorts, not from them, but in a card, and you can't talk to them. Whoa.
Yeah, you can't ask questions. You can't get any closure from that. Like, that just opens up Pandora's box.
Yeah.
And then
I don't know if we have the time on this episode.
Oh,
like
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Far out. Oh, now Siri wants to jump in.
Siri's telling us about the movie. Yeah, so that was a big turning point in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's interesting.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, it's interesting from that point because he never, from that point on, never shares that with his friends until he's forced to near the end of the movie. And so he's walking around with this like hidden secret that he's dealing with alone.
Yeah, like he goes, I was shocked that he got to the gallery that night and he just didn't even, I mean, he ended up meeting this other man and talking to him, and he tried to buy him a drink and exchange numbers and whatnot. And his friends are like, where have you been? Like, he's like, I've been here for 45 minutes. But it's like...
Hasn't explained a single thing.
Hasn't explained a single thing, just avoidance.
Yeah.
And then didn't even tell them, like, guys, can we go or something? Like, I just want to tell you what I've just been through and found out about our friend, my husband, that...
And I can understand also if he wasn't ready for that too. So I can understand both sides. But, you know, in the time span of the movie, I think, like, that bottles right up. And you can see how unhealthy it is for him, for all their friendships, and the scenario that sort of plays out. So, yeah, it's just it's an interesting story when it comes to that.
Yeah. So then how far is it? I can't remember, but then he invites them.
Yeah, so I guess what plays out is he realizes that his husband Oliver had bought or rented a place in Paris.
Yeah, lease thing, and it was going to run out, so that's why the financial planner was like, the lease is coming up to an end.
Do you want to renew?
Yeah.
And so obviously not, but they want to...
He's curious.
Yeah, he wants to go and see what this secret life has been like.
Yeah.
And so he invites his two best friends to Paris, unbeknownst to them.
He says, we all need this. We need a holiday to get away, to deal with our grief,
But he's
to
secretly
have some
trying
fun.
to spy out.
Yeah,
what's been
doesn't
going on.
tell them.
Yeah.
Oliver leased this and there's someone else over there. Yeah.
So to cut a long story short, I guess at this part, they go and have a great time in Paris, and there's still some things under the water, under the surface that none of them are talking about. You know, his friend who she's just broken up with her boyfriend, his other mate who they dated a long time ago who still has feelings for him, his relationship with Oliver, and then this secret life that he didn't know about, this betrayal, all in Paris.
They're all holding these secrets from each other and it all comes out.
And another guy who he just spontaneously met who he'd be interested in getting to know a bit more.
The guy from the gallery.
That's right.
He is actually French, and so...
Yeah, and I think what I noticed is, like, each of them checked on each other and they said, you know, are you okay? But none of them were honest with how they were doing. Everyone said yes. And no one stopped to really just open the conversation, you know? And I think that, like, we can ask people, are you okay? But I think sometimes it takes a second nudge. Like, no. Tell me how you really are, you know? Or would you like to talk about that person? Or would you like to talk about how you're feeling about this? Because, yeah, I know I needed those nudges. Sometimes you don't want to chat, but
Totally.
to have a close friend that you trust is just priceless.
Yeah. Sometimes, when we ask the question, hey, we just wait for the, I'm good, I'm all good. But that's such a surface level answer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially if you're a good friend who you'd expect the same back from them. You'd want them to be, you know, because like as much as sometimes we hold things in, we really are seeking and hoping that someone is going to dig deeper and actually care enough to ask the deeper question.
I saw this beautiful reel on Insta this week. It came up, 2 dudes. I don't know the podcast. I don't know what the topic was, what they were talking about. One guy, I think I could tell, was like a martial arts or a fighter or a boxer or something, because his ears were cauliflowered, so I could just sort of tell that. The host was like quite grungy and tattooed and so forth. And so that's all I sort of, as a context. And it came up where he'd asked a question to this boxer or whoever he was, and he couldn't get his words out. And he just breaks down. And he's sort of talking about his dad and how his dad abused him, but he couldn't even, and he's like stuttering. He's saying like sorry and apologizing, like sorry, and the host was so like patient and beautiful, and he just says, "It's okay, man." He goes, "Some things are really hard." And they're just sitting there, and it's this awkward silence, but it's not awkward at the same time. And he goes, "It's okay, we can just sit here. That's all right."
Wow.
Yeah, and it's like this 40, 50-second dialogue of just, he's like, "It's all good, man. I'll just sit here with you." Just holding space for the dude.
Oh.
Until he's able to compose himself and then talk about the story. And I think that's probably what we need more of when we're going through grief. It's like, I can see you're not well. That's okay. I'm just going to be here when you're ready.
So often we just shove tissues in someone's face, or like, here, deal with the tears, or, want to patch it up or cover it up. But yeah, so often we just need to be told, hey, it's okay, just let it out.
Yeah.
Because often people feel like the crier or the griever feels like they're an inconvenience, or they're a bother because they're crying, because they've got these emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so back to the story.
So they head out. They go out for this night, and they end up doing karaoke. And one thing leads to another.
And a whole bunch of other stuff.
Drinks
and things.
Drinks and things. And Mark goes out for a walk, meets up with the other dude, then doesn't come back till the morning.
The girlfriend's with a guy, and she disappears.
Yeah, she'd pulled a guy in for dinner, and then he was there, and
so they all split up.
Yeah.
And then in the morning can't find sort of each other, and one's, been in trouble. And
Mark comes home, no one's there, he goes to bed, and then wakes up, and everyone's there. Things just shit hits the fan.
And they're upset at him.
Yeah. Where were you?
He left and didn't say anything to them.
Yeah, left, didn't communicate.
And in that
said he'd be back, but he didn't.
In that moment, the door opens to the apartment, and Oliver's other lover walks in the door, and they kind of
who are you?
Yeah, who are you? And then they put 2 and 2 together that this is Oliver's secret.
Well, Mark does.
Yeah.
And then he has to tell them, because they're like, who the heck is this?
That's why we're in Paris. And man, it's...
Oh.
You could have cut the tension in the air with a knife, eh?
Yeah.
It's a mess by this stage. It's a total mess.
And it just goes to show that none of them were honest. And so it came to bite them all in the butt. And then they were all mad at each other. And, I think that it hurt. They all got hurt because they were all like, I was caring for you, and you didn't tell me this, and you went there, and you didn't tell us you weren't going to come back, or, you didn't communicate. And so, communication and honesty right there was the biggest keys, and neither of those were used very well.
Yeah.
So it just all blew up, and...
Yeah, and I think there's...
I don't know how to respond to that.
See, even Siri doesn't know how to respond to bad honesty. Bad honesty.
That doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
I'm not even going to try to fix it. Okay, so I think there's some, I think there are some, really key moments that come out towards the end of the film. I think there's also some, big lessons from within it. Mark also just slips it in that his mum had died as well, sort of in the year before Oliver's death. So he's, got these 2 deaths that he's dealing with and grieving. And he mentions that he used Oliver as a distraction for his mum's grief.
Yes.
And that he felt guilty the whole time, especially after Oliver had died, because he didn't really grieve his mum. So I think there's a lesson there in terms of that avoidance, you know, in instead of running from grief, like leaning into it.
And this comes from the Frenchman, Theo. He's the one who's asking these deep questions and like digging deeper and challenging him. Yeah, and asking further. Whereas his friends who were great and were there for him
didn't ask any deep questions.
Yeah,
they were
didn't
all shallow
quite. Yeah,
surface level.
Yes. So he actually said to this man, they went and got into a gallery late at night, and he was like, "You're being really kind to me," and he's like, "Well, it's intentional." Like this man, obviously very mature in who he was and how to deal with people, was just, very intentional. Knowing Mark's situation, it was just like, this guy needs love and kindness.
Totally.
And
which is what we need when we're grieving.
a real friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was beautiful.
In the apartment, you know, sort of his two friends leave to go home, and it's left with him and his
The other dude.
husband's other lover.
Yeah.
So
Luca.
It's just the two of them. Yeah, his name's Luca. And Luca sort of says, "Can I stay a night? Because I've got nowhere to stay." So it gets even more awkward. Mark allows him.
Well, that was while the friends were there.
Against his own will, like his friends, they let him stay. And then on the final night, he stayed again. Separate rooms, just to be clear. Like, it wasn't like this weird, didn't get weird like that. But
he was packing up his stuff.
yeah, as they were packing up and leaving, Luca came to say, you know, Oliver loved you very much. And Mark's, you know, almost in this moment, there's this sense of forgiveness by saying, you know, well, not saying, but you could feel it, that it's like it wasn't his fault and he didn't mean to harm me. And Luca in the moment goes to give him a hug to say goodbye, and Mark stops him.
Whoa.
And he just said, a hug might be pushing it, but he shakes his hand. And I just felt like this, like...
Luca's like, oh, yeah. Like,
yeah, I felt like this air of forgiveness that
Yeah.
Mark just sort of said, I forgive you. But I think in the same moment, he forgave himself, which I think is huge when it comes to our grief.
Yeah.
There are other people involved sometimes. You know, it may have been a car accident where someone else is involved. Bringing ourselves to forgive that person. It might be doctors who are involved. It might be ourselves that we need to forgive. I think it's massive. And, you know, from what we've learned, forgiveness to others and ourselves is a huge part of healing.
Totally. Yeah, it was a beautiful little part of the scene to end Paris, to wrap that up in a bow before he went back. Yeah. And then he goes back to London, and he's got this big empty house and
Sells it.
decides to put it on the market.
Yeah.
Gets a buyer, and
Too many memories there.
yeah, the girl's like, "You can't leave me. I'm not going to travel an hour to see you." And he's like, "Just let me have my house by the ocean where I can paint," because Theo told him he needs to paint again. And
which he was thinking of giving up because he used to paint for his husband and paint his husband.
Yes.
And so that was obviously like just this deep, you know, I guess it would be a trigger. It would also be deeply connected in so many ways. But he loved painting. And so
he could paint other things, but he ends up doing that, buying a house, painting. I think it's a year later. His friends come to his gallery show of all his new pieces, and there's one of them, each of them. And yeah, he still paints Oliver, paints the French guy, paints the best friends, and himself. And they're all like, "Wow, I'm so glad you picked this up again. Like, you're better than I remember."
yeah, it's a beautiful way to end the movie.
Yeah.
Seeing that he's healing, but also taking up some of those hobbies that it's not worth just trashing them.
And it was it seemed like a real healing thing for him.
Totally.
Yeah. Hobbies and being creative is a healing way for grief.
What a movie. Good grief.
Good grief.
Good movie.
Good name.
Yeah, so we're not, I guess we're not here to give it like a 10 out of 10 or a 7 or anything like that.
Yeah,
I
we're
think,
not movie critics or anything.
but I think just those relationships and dynamics were interesting to pull apart. I think there's some key lessons in the movie
definitely
that we took away. I think one is like practicing your own honesty.
Yes.
Honesty with yourself and honesty with others. Being diligent. Oh, is diligent the word? Or like, making sure you know who you're being honest with. It's not everyone and anyone. It's the people that you know you can trust. So yeah, practicing honesty is a big key.
And communication. Because as we saw in that scene, honesty and communication breakdown.
Yeah, causes way
all
too
sorts
much
of mayhem.
trouble. Yeah.
And I think don't rush your grief, no matter what, whether it's your closest friends trying to pull you out to have drinks or whatever. Yeah, just in your own time. If you're not ready for that.
Yeah, and don't allow other people's expectations
to influence you.
Yeah. Like they were like 6 months, you should be here by now. You shouldn't be anywhere by now. You should be exactly where you are when you are.
Yeah, we want the old you back, but as we all know,
there's not going to be an old you.
Yeah.
It's not going to return. It's a new you now.
Yeah. Yeah, old you's not coming back.
I think another one on that is it's these two hands, right? It's light and dark. It's contrast. It's, yes, don't allow your friends' expectations to influence you, but at the same time, they're going to hurt you and you need to allow them grace. That's if you want friends after all of this,
Totally.
We know that while we're grieving, our emotions are high, and if you listen to our last episode with Dr. Gina, she talks about in our grief and trauma that the front of our brain is the logical part and it doesn't perform while we're going through grief.
Yeah.
The rear of our brain is the emotional and it's just going off, right? And so we're not making logical decisions. And so for us to throw friends out just because of an offense, we need to allow grace to our friends. And likewise, we'd hope that they would give us grace as well in our grief because, hey, who knows, we've said things and done things that we look back and go, man, I was grieving
and snapped.
And I acted out.
Yeah.
So allowing grace both ways.
Totally.
It's massive.
What else you got there?
Yeah.
I gave you my notes too.
Yeah, well, we talked about picking up hobbies and
yes,
either new ones or old ones.
Yeah.
In this story, it's finding that old hobby and
totally
refreshing it.
Yeah, getting creative always helps.
And we've mentioned it already, but finding forgiveness for yourself and for others.
Yeah, that's huge because it's forgiveness as well as guilt and, well, the guilt, you are forgiving the guilt and all that sort of thing, but like holding in the emotions, holding on to, unforgiveness, it just bottles up. It's no good for anyone, especially you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the person that you're not forgiving, they don't know what you're holding on to.
No, forgiveness.
That's not hurting
whether
them.
Whether you're forgiving others or yourself, it always is helping you.
Yeah. Yep, definitely.
Ah, good movie.
Yeah. Did enjoy it. We don't often watch a movie during the week, but
yeah,
thought we'd do that for you guys. Bring it here fresh.
We had to for good grief. So, hey, if you've seen the movie, we'd love to know what your thoughts are. Drop us a comment below wherever you're watching this or listening to this from.
Yeah.
And we'd like to know what lessons you picked up.
Yeah, totally.
And what should everyone do if they're not hanging out with us or?
Yeah, if you're not hanging out with us, click the links below. Come find us. Come hang out. We've got a support group for you, and it's beautiful, and we love it. And we'd love you to come and join us.
Cool. We hope you've enjoyed this little bit of a different episode. Until next time, big love from both of us.
Ciao.
Bye for now.